This is SPX. I'm going to go over this on the 5-minute, the daily, the weekly, and the monthly timeframes. Thank you to Murat for pointing this out. He says he sees a pattern developing and a gap that would take us to roughly 4,400. I'll get to that in just a moment. But first, we ended the week at 43.08, up more than 1%. This is where we are. To the north side, a gap begins at roughly 43.11. 2 standard deviations and resistance and a possible take profit area takes us to 43.26. That gap closes out at 43.37. Above that, at 3 standard deviations and another level of resistance, 43.43. And at 4 standard deviations and another take profit area, 43.61. If we get to this level, I will anticipate price to fall as people take their profits and they run, and the stock and price to take a breather and consolidate. Now, to the south side, back at the middle of the trend or the mean, and also the baseline, 42.91. From where we are, this is considered support. And if we make it to this line, I will anticipate a little bit of a bounce at support and possibly just grinding along the base. Now, to the south side of that at support as well is 42.56, 42.39, and 42.22. This is also support. If we make it to this line, I will anticipate a bounce here, a bounce here, and a bounce here. Looking left, note this gap that filled to the upside at 42.57. Note the bounce here at support, grinding up, and then we did not quite make it all the way to this line, which is resistance, and so we started to fall apart, went up, went sideways, and then the pattern repeats itself. This is resistance, starts to fall down. And also note right here, this little zone at 4 standard deviations starts to fall down. Price does, as people take their profits and they run. I do not ever anticipate a stock to continue for the day past 4 standard deviations without taking a breather first. And note this gap closed to the south side at 42.99. Gaps are, to me, an easy way to read the markets to the upside and to the downside. Let me take this to the daily time frame and make that a little bit easier to read here. I've marked it out many times, so it gets a little jumbled, but we are right here. To the middle of the trend takes us to 44.31, and above that at 2 standard deviations, that takes us to 47.55. And this is the gap right here that Murat was pointing out. It starts at 43.75 and closes out at roughly 44.01, 4,400, give or take. And to the south side, at -2 standard deviations, we are looking at 41.03. And I had looked at this back in June, and an analyst named Tom Lee predicted that SPX will go to 4,800 by the end of the year. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we do. And note right here, we didn't quite make it to 2 standard deviations, but close enough. You can't anticipate it to always hit, but roughly in this zone, and look what happens. Falls down, back to support, and grinds back up again. Note this bounce right here at support, and when we go up, this turns into resistance, grinding along, and then we fall apart again. And the cycle repeats itself. So mark out your gaps if you have not done that, and you'll see where price could be heading or what to look forward to. In my case, that's how I like to look at it. Now, the RSI is turning up on the daily. This is overbought here. Oversold, and we are not overbought yet. We've got a lot of room. And let's take a look at this on the weekly. The RSI is also churning up at 49. Now, let me note this bounce here at support at 22.83, rides up to resistance and falls back down again. And this is where we are. To the middle of the trend on the weekly takes us to roughly 45.73. And because my chart is so marked up, it's hard for me to see patterns. So I'm not exactly sure what that pattern is. I don't know if that's supposed to be a head and shoulder because it just looks so ugly on my chart. But if you know, please let me know. But I do see this former pattern, a W right here, and a bunch of gaps there. Again, the RSI at 49. Let me take a look at this on the monthly. The RSI is finally curling up a little bit at 54, plenty of room to get to 70. I use RSI as support and resistance as well, and I try to bail out if we ever hit this region. Note how we never stay up here. It always falls apart. Your opportunity to get back in again and then ride it to 70 and above and get back out. All right. On the monthly, right here, the middle of the trend takes us to 45.40, and at 2 standard deviations takes us to 50.85, and at -2 standard deviations, 34.36. Obviously, a lot of levels in between, and that's where you'll want to flip over to the weekly, daily, the hourly, and by the minutes if you like to track. And let me show you SPY very quickly. This is the monthly. Hard to see, but we are right here, and the middle of the trend would take us to roughly 453. And on the 5-minute time frame, I talked about this previously back on the 5th. This gap closed to the upside at $424. This one closed out at 426. This one closes out at 438. Ignore my horizontal lines, but we are right here. To the north side takes us to roughly $431, 433, 434, and to the south side back at the middle of the trend, the mean or the base, 427, 424, 422, and 420. All right, that does it for me. This week, I will also go over SCHD, SCHG, and VIG. Those are also ETFs that Murat is interested in, and I will go over those later. Thank you so much for watching.